Welcome everyone. Jason here to talk to you about type in Illustrator and how all the different type tools work. Starting off with type, going to the toolbar and showing all the different types of type tools that we have. The standard type tool, which is accessed by the shortcut the letter T, area type, type on a path, vertical, type, area type, and type on a path as well. And then the touch type tool. You'll notice that only the type tool has a shortcut as well as the touch type tool. These other items do not have shortcuts. They're not used as much. With a flyout menu, I'm going to click on the vertical arrow on the right side to get this to be a floating panel to begin to work with. What's unique about type in Illustrator is how it works when you click on your document using the type tool. And there's two different kinds of type definitions in Illustrator: point type and paragraph type. Point type is when you simply click on a point, and by the way, this is a default here that actually puts copy into your text container or your point when you click. If you don't like this feature, some people don't, if you don't like this feature, this is a preference that can be changed in the Illustrator Preferences, Type, and uncheck the Fill New Type Objects with Placeholder Text. That way, when you click or you draw a text container, it won't fill with copy. Something that you can pick and choose if you want that or don't want that. So getting back to point type. Point type, I've clicked on a specific point and I begin to type. And as you type, it will go on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And when I mean forever, it will continue on until infinity. There is no break in this point type. When you are dealing with point type, if you want to break it into separate lines, you will have to use your text cursor to place your cursor in line, click return to get your text to break. This is point type. Now it doesn't look that much different from what we call paragraph type. So what's the difference? Well, when I look at point type here, it looks like I've got a bounding box because I've clicked on my selection tool, and I could go and pull on the handles and I could rotate this text and I could do everything that I could normally do with text. But we'll show you that very shortly. Going back to the type tool, this time I'm going to not just click and form a point, which you can see here, there's my point. I'm actually going to click and drag and create a container. And the container is then going to fill with placeholder text. Going back to my selection tool, I click on my text and I click on this text, and it looks like they're both in containers. Well, technically, this is not in the container. This is just a bounding box, and you're like, okay, how am I supposed to know this? Well, couple telltale signs. First off, you'll notice when you click on the text, a little bit hard to see, but the type starts off with just that little dot right here. That's point type. When I click on paragraph type, you don't notice that little dot. And it's like, okay, that's pretty obscure. Sure, it is, but that's one way. Another way is when you click on text, you see this little lollipop sticking out the right-hand side. This one is not filled. I click on my paragraph text, and that one is filled. So, okay, so empty is going to be point type, solid is going to be paragraph type. Again, how do you really discern what the difference is? Well, if I go back to my point type, I look at my pull handles, and the bottom center pull handle is just a pull handle. If I click on paragraph type, the bottom center handle actually has a little window shade coming out of it. So let me show you why these different versions exist and what you can and can't do with each and every one. First and foremost, with point type, if I select it with the selection tool and then I start to change the size of what I think is a container, you'll notice that it's just a bounding box, and this is where I can distort my type. And this isn't a good thing, because if you distort your type, then things could be just wacky and distorted, and you wouldn't know it if you distorted just a little bit. So I'm going to undo that. If I go to my paragraph text, this truly is a bounding box. When I rejigger that bounding box change the size by clicking on any one of the pull handles, this is where the text can flow. So, point type doesn't flow at all. It just simply resizes, squishes, and gets exaggerated or pulled or stretched. Paragraph type will reflow when you change your bounding box, so that's quite nice. Now, one more thing that happens when you have paragraph text. You may have an exceptionally large container with less text in it, so a very large container that's just filled with a lot of space. You can go to the bottom center pull handle and pull up to close that up. But what makes this even nicer and easier is clicking on the window shade, that little pull handle that comes out of the center bottom pull handle. Double click and you're going to window shade it up. If you double click on that and it closes it up, it's going to close it right up to the bottom of the type. Now, one thing that can also happen, you have more text or type than the container can hold. Then, and only then, does the paragraph type show up with that red plus in the lower right-hand corner. That same window shade can also be used to double-click on that pull handle to open up all of your text. So if you're going to be setting copy, where you're going to be doing paragraphs, paragraph text is probably a smarter way to go and work with this so that you can very easily change the size of your container and flow your copy. Point text is not the best way to go ahead and do multiple lines of copy, because if I need to break something, I can't just change the size of my text box, because it really isn't a text box, it's just a bounding box, and it doesn't reflow the copy. So if I want to change the copy, I will need to double click, and that's a quick way to get into your text editing, whether it be point type or paragraph type. Take your selection tool, double click, it's going to activate your type tool, and then you can put in breaks inside your point type. Okay? Now, can these be converted from point type to paragraph type and paragraph type to point type? Absolutely. But first, let's talk about why you would use point type. Well, point type is very common. It's simple, it's easy. You take your type tool, you click, and you type something. So you're doing a headline, or you're labeling a graphic, or doing something on a map, or you want to type in some numbers. And all you want is just to say 16, okay? Go back to your selection tool, and there you have a 16. You're not going to want to break this 16 into 2 lines, because that wouldn't read as well. But now you have this point type. It's just a very simple, box with a type in it. And if you stretch it, yes, you can stretch it all out of whack. Okay, but we probably wouldn't do that. We just need it as a label or a standalone item. But if we did want to convert point type into paragraph type, we can do this very easily. Selecting my type with a selection tool, double click on this lollipop, and it's going to convert it to paragraph type. How do I know? It turns filled, and I get my pull handle. Now when I go and I revamp the box, and I change the shape of my text container, it will now reflow the copy. Okay, that works. If I have paragraph type and I would like to turn it into point type, double click on the lollipop, it becomes hollow. It is now point type, which means when I click on what I think is my container, it really isn't, it's just my bounding box, and then I can scale the type, and unfortunately, if I don't scale it proportionately, it's going to distort the type. So, can I use one or the other? Absolutely. Both are going to work just fine for setting type. However, you may want to go ahead and plan ahead to make sure that you're using something that's going to be easily editable and make sense for the amount of copy that you're putting into your document. I wouldn't do long lines of paragraphs with point type. I would definitely do it with my paragraph type so that I can then go in and resize the container. Double click on this to convert it back to paragraph type, and therefore when I resize the container, it will now flow with the container. Interesting. So that's the basic difference between point type and paragraph type. Now there's a few other interesting things that happen. I'm going to go back and I'm going to convert this back to point type. And so here it says, okay, when you convert this back to point type, what's going to happen is that any overset text that's outside the container is going to be lost. I'm going to click on my window shade because I don't want to lose that copy. and I'm going to double click back on the handle in order to go and turn this into point type. Now with point type, if I do want to size it larger and smaller and not squish it or squeeze it disproportionately, click on one of the pull handles, and while you're pulling or pushing, just simply hold down your Shift key, and this will allow you to scale and size everything and keep it in proportion. If you want to rotate this, simply hover on outside of any one of the corner handles and rotate this copy. Holding down your Shift key will snap it to the 45 and 90 degree increments. Okay, point type. Now going over to paragraph type. If I hold down my Shift key and I resize, I will not be resizing the copy. I will just be proportionately resizing the container. If I go and I rotate this container, the container rotates, but the copy does not. And this is paragraph type. Now here's a trick, and oddly enough, so people are like, okay, so I get it. You can't rotate paragraph type. Well, you can and you can't. If you rotate it manually here, okay, and do this, the type doesn't rotate, but the box does. However, if you go into your Properties panel and you rotate through the actual Properties panel rotate portion, the copy and the container will rotate. I know, perplexing, but this is Illustrator. So it's kind of interesting to see how that works. So manual rotation directly on the container itself will only rotate the container, but not rotate the text. Going and using the rotate here will do that. So something to think about, okay? But now you know what happens and why. And I know some of you watching this will be like, that's the reason why it does it. Yeah, that is the reason why it does that. Okay, so once we've got the point type and paragraph type sorted out, now we're good to go and start working with our fonts. So I'm going to go back to my type in Illustrator that I've set here. It is paragraph type right here. I could double click and turn it to a point type. Then if I want to resize it very easily, I can hold down my Shift key and resize it. But if I'd like to use shortcuts here, I can double click to activate my type tool and then click 3 times to select the entire line. Now to change the size of the copy, I can do this in a couple different ways. I have my Control or my Options bar open up at the top here. If you don't have that, go under Window and get Control back. Here we have our Character panel shortcut, and we have our Paragraph panel shortcut as well as just some basic items, font, style, and size, and then basic paragraph alignment. I also have my Properties panel up, which allows me to access many of my character and paragraph items in this Properties panel quickly and easily. If I did want to have the separate character and paragraph panel up so that I have access to the full host of character and paragraph formatting features, Window, I'm going to go down to Type, close to the bottom, call up our character panel, and there's my character panel and my paragraph panel as well. I'm going to snap those apart and then magnetize them together here so we can see all of this content right here. I don't need my Properties panel right here, but it's fine to be able to go through. Is there slightly truncated versions of the character and paragraph options? You'd have to click on the 3 dots in order to bring up everything that you see here. Now, interestingly enough, when you go into your character panel, it doesn't show all of the options. So you have to click on the character panel, the drop-down menu or the cheese grater, and choose Show Options to get all the options in the character panel. In the paragraph panel, it is showing all the options, because if I hide the options, you're going to see that it doesn't really hide anything. So, there's the hide options right there. Now the show options, there was a slight delay. Okay, so now we're seeing everything that we can see in the character and paragraph formatting control. Point size. What's the size of our type? Well, here's our type size, and we have our up and down arrows, we have our drop-down menu, and we have presets. Ways that you can set the type: select it, use the up or down arrow, or put your cursor in that value field. Don't even have to highlight it, just put your cursor in there, and then use your up or down arrow on your keyboard. If you're impatient and you would like to make your type size go larger or smaller faster, hold down your Shift key and then use your shift up and down arrow, and that will increase the increments by 10-fold. You can also type in the value of anything that you want and hit return. Keyboard shortcuts for doing this, nice and easy. Shift Command on the Mac or Shift Control on the PC. And then looking at your keyboard, you have your period and your comma keys, which also, by the way, shares with your greater than and your less than keys. So simple. Shift Command on the Mac, Shift Control on the PC. Greater than will go ahead and increase the size of your fonts. Shift Command or Shift Control less than will go ahead and reduce the size of your fonts. And by the way, this is true in many other Adobe applications. So once you learn this shortcut here, this is something that can continue on. Next we have our leading. Well, leading is going to be space between lines. So if I put my cursor in my type and I hit return, now I have 2 lines of type, and I'm going to go and I'm going to select everything. Different ways to select. You could just double click with your selection tool to activate your type tool, and then click 3 times to select the entire line, or click and drag over everything to select all of your type. One shortcut that I like, once you have your text cursor in there, is going under the Select menu and choose Select All, which is Command or Control A. Lots of type. If you don't want to go in and click and drag or try to select it, just simply put your cursor in there. Command or Control A, Command on the Mac, Control on the PC, is going to get you all your type selected. Now your leading is space between the lines of copy, and here is my leading, and when it's in parentheses, that means that it is automatic leading. And automatic leading means when I increase or decrease the point size of my copy, the leading will automatically increase or decrease in direct correlation to the size of my type. And this correlation is this. It is basically 20% of the point size of the type. So if I have a 100-point type, you'll see my leading is 20% more, or 120 points. So that's the automatic correlation. If you set something so you can have that type leading be whatever you want, other than automatic, so a fixed amount, you can see that you can set your leading easily. Same shortcuts that we had with a type. You can use your up or down arrows here. You can select your field or select the entire value in the field, and then use your up and down arrows. My shortcut that I love here is the Option or the Alt key, and an Option up arrow is going to tighten up the leading. Option down arrow is going to loosen up the leading. Now going in and doing kerning and tracking. Kerning and tracking is very important, especially when you get into type that is like headline type, where the larger you make it, you may see different types of spacing start to show up between the letters. And the spacing in between the letters is something that may not fit exactly. It may look like some letters have more space, some letters have less space. And this all depends on the font that you choose. Some fonts look really good when you type them in. Other fonts you may need to go in and adjust because the space between just doesn't look exactly like it's supposed to. So as I choose a different typeface, I see that some of the spacing and the correlation between these letters could be cleaned up just a little bit. So what do? Well, I can put my cursor between 2 letters, and here I can then go in and do my kerning. Kerning is space between characters. Leading is space between lines. That's something that people get confused. So leading, lines, kerning, characters. And when I put my text cursor between those 2 characters, I can reduce the amount of kerning between those, and that's going to tighten things up when I have a negative number. If I put my cursor between 2 letters and increase that amount, that's going to be a positive number, and that's going to give me more space in between those letters. Shortcut for kerning is very simple. Put your cursor between the 2 letters. Option or Alt right arrow is going to loosen up your kerning. Option or Alt left arrow is going to tighten up your kerning. Now, if you do select all of your copy, and you have a typeface, and there are some typefaces here that just seem to have a lot of space in them naturally. So here's one. It's not the best looking typeface, but it's like, wow, there's just huge spaces between all of these letters. Now you could go in and you could manually kern or set the character space between each one of these letters, or you can select an entire word, line, or paragraph, and you can go over to its neighbor here, which is tracking. Tracking and kerning are essentially the same function. The difference between kerning and tracking is kerning is between two characters, and tracking is over multiple selected characters. Tracking, then, will have the exact same effect. A negative tracking number will bring all of the spacing of the characters closer together or further apart when you do a positive number. This does not stretch the type, this does not change the type, and this does not change the size of the type. All it does is it tightens the space in between each and every character. So if I track this tighter, overall, I'm tracking everything tighter at equal space. Now I notice there's some characters here that need to be kerned separately, so I put my cursor between those and use my Option or Alt left arrow to then kern. So kerning and tracking, essentially the same, okay? But kerning is space between individual characters, tracking is multiple characters overall. So if I select all the copy, the shortcut to do this is exactly the same as it is for kerning. Option or Alt, right arrow or left arrow. The difference is I have all my types selected. Just put your cursor in between the two. Option or Alt, left or right arrow will just do the space in between the two. Kerning and tracking. Good things to know. Going into what I call the no-no land. Stretching type here. Vertical scale, where people go and they stretch the type. You know what? Being a graphic designer, I am completely and totally against this. There are plenty of typefaces that don't look very good or are already condensed or already stretched. Don't go in and stretch it further, okay? Some people don't know how to change the size, so they go in there and they just stretch it equally. No, this is not a substitute at all. Quite frankly, I don't like to use the vertical or horizontal stretch at all. I will only use it in a stretch. I generally stay away from this because you're deforming the letters, okay? Now, one more thing in what I call this no-no land here is what's called baseline shift. And people confuse baseline shift with leading. And the reason why is because if I select a line of copy and I take my leading and I reduce the number, which is going to bring the leading tighter, you can see that it moves the line up or down as I loosen or tighten the leading. Well, my baseline shift also seems to do the same thing as well by moving this up or down. However, this is not what it's for at all. If you want to move your line up, lines are adjusted by leading. What my baseline shift is for is if I do something like this, where I have like a TM or I have a circle R, and I would like to go and I would like to move this up or down off of the baseline. And the baseline is the invisible line that all this type sits on. The base of the character sits there. Baseline shift then allows me to select a particular character and bump this up or down in order to adjust it. And this is not a substitute for leading at all. This is a very specific, like a very specific character, a one character kind of adjustment. Circle R's, TMs, subscripts, footnotes, things like that, where I want to go in and I want to take that single character and change the baseline shift. That's that. Okay. Now we also have our type rotation as well. And the type rotation, when you go in here, you can go in and you can rotate your copy, but I'm not sure why you'd want to go through and rotate your copy upside down like this in the middle of it. Not sure, but you know what? It's there, okay? So it's there. I wanted to show you. Now we're getting into all of our different type styles. So down here with the type styles, I'd like to go in and work with all caps. So I can click on that, bring up the all caps, what I'm doing. One word of advice, folks, if you are typing something in, do not go and hold your shift key down or use your caps lock and type in all caps. People are like, why not? Because when the client comes back and it's like, oh, could you do those all lowercase? You have to type it in all over again. If you want all uppercase, type everything in normally, then in your character panel, then do your all caps style. That way you can turn it on and turn it off and you get both. You don't have to re-type or reconfigure or re-input your copy just because you typed with a caps lock key on. I'm going to turn that off. Next is lowercase caps, where we kind of have initial caps and then lowercase caps. We also have superscript, which is when you have superscript or something like this, like a circle or a TM, and you want to make it smaller and shift it up, then you do your superscript. There's your subscript right there. And then with whatever type we have here, we have our underline, which is not commonly used anymore, and our strike through. So those are our basic functions and features. You'll notice what isn't here. There is no bold and there is no italic. And the reason why is because Adobe believes that if you want a bold typeface, you will have to go to that typeface and choose that style, which we're going to do right now. So there is no fake bold or fake italic. If your font does not have a bold or italic, you will not get it out of Illustrator. Just not going to happen. Let's talk about typefaces. We have our type drop-down menu, and it gives us hundreds of typefaces that are already in Illustrator. So I'm going to choose this, and I realize, oh my gosh, that type's really condensed. Well, because I had gone in here and I had set my kerning and tracking, it doesn't reset to 0 when I choose a new typeface. And every typeface has different metrics in it. So if you kern or you track and you choose a different typeface, you will have to set these values for the kerning and tracking back to 0 when you select all your copy, and then go back in and re-kern and retrack. Okay. So with this list of fonts here, you can see that you can see exactly what the font looks like right here on the right-hand side. What you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. Okay. So I can scroll over my selected copy, but I see exactly what it looks like in this panel. One nice feature here is up at the top of the right-hand column, it says selected text. I could go in and I could have it visualize the selected text. You see right here, it says type in Illustrator, so I can see I'm working with my text here. But I could also see the font in terms of typography, the word typography, or quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, so you can see every single character in it, and so on. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can see this text displayed here. So I'm going to choose, say, this particular typeface. Great. Now, a lot of times when I'm working with type, I don't know that I'm going through my type menu and seeing the type. I don't really want to go through each and every font here and be like, oh, I like that, I like that. So here's a really quick shortcut. Don't go in to your font menu and then click on the drop-down menu here. Just select your copy, put your cursor inside this font drop-down menu. You don't even have to click on the drop-down part. Just put your cursor in there. And now use your down arrow or your up arrow, and that's going to walk through every font in your font menu, and you can see what it looks like without having to go over, do the drop-down menu, look at it, come back, click on the drop-down menu, and so on. This is really nice. Now, when you get to a typeface that you like, what you can then do is then you can look at the styles that it contains. Here, Century Old Gothic only has regular. So if I want bold, I can't use this particular typeface because there is no bold or there is no italic. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll just keep scrolling through and I'll see something else. I'll find something that I really like. And so Clarendon, okay, that's nice. Let me see these different styles that we have here. Oh, great, they have regular and bold. Nice, I can choose either one. Okay, they don't have italic in this particular typeface, but so it goes. So, what about getting more fonts? Simple. This is ridiculously easy. When you go in and you want to get more fonts, click on the drop-down menu, and then right there at the top of the font menu, click on the Find More. When you choose Find More, it's automatically activating your Adobe fonts. And what are your Adobe fonts? Well, since you subscribe to the Creative Cloud, you have thousands of fonts that you have access to right here, or in the website too. If you go to type.adobe.com, you can then see all of these typefaces that are free for you to use. You pay for them in your subscription. So these are all the different typefaces. It takes several seconds for them to load because there's literally thousands of them. And you could scroll through all the A's and B's, and there's just some absolutely phenomenally cool, well done designer typefaces and some crazy stuff, some very specific stuff. I love this. I absolutely love this. Now, what makes this even more cool are these features. Going over, if I choose this one, I mean, this looks like a very funky, computer typeface, awesome 80 videos game, great for a t-shirt or something like that. I choose that. By clicking on it, it automatically activates that font. Right there, automatically activates it. The little cloud with the arrow comes down, says it's being activated, and all right, so activate this font. You're like, yep, okay, great, it's there. So now that font is activated. Okay, you can see the arrows are going back and forth, so it's activating it. So it's going to be in your Illustrator file from here on out. Now, what happens if you are doing some type of like 80s computer game and you're like, you know what, I'd really like to see other typefaces that are like this. When click on this little double tilde here, or this little wavy equal sign, it'll allow you to show similar fonts that have these similar characteristics. So right here it says, oh, there's no other ones shown. And there are, but you can actually go to the website and you can actually see ones that are similar. So if we do something like this, I think that we have a much better chance of finding something similar here and clicking on the Find Similar. Ah, there we go. So here's a whole bunch of typefaces that are very similar to the one that we chose. Right there, it's like, okay, this is like so cool. So what I had chosen was kind of a thin, condensed sans serif, and it's showing me all of the other ones that are in the Adobe Type Kit that are thin, condensed sans serifs. When I'm done with a comparison, go up to the top bar and click the back button, and I can go back to my standard list. I can have funky, fun, fresh, crazy typefaces, serif, sans serif, slab serif, ones with dangling participles, ones with little toes and giblies and nibblies, and everything you could possibly imagine. And there are some absolutely beautiful and also outrageous and fun typefaces here. They're all here. Spend some time to check it out. It's really quite cool. Now, if you find typefaces that you like all the time, you can click on this star, which is going to add it to your favorites. When you add it to your favorites, they just come up in your list as your favorites, which you can filter by clicking on just showing your favorites, by clicking on that star, unfiltering by clicking off that. Now, you can also filter these fonts by classification. This is just sensational. I want something that's a slab serif. So if I click on the slab serif, it's going to bring up all of the Adobe fonts that are a slab serif. I can also give different looks and feels of the typefaces that I like, and different styles, different properties, light, medium, heavy weight, condensed, low X height, high X height right there, lots of contrast, uppercase, lowercase, different type of irregular, height numbers, everything. It's like, okay, I want a bold slab serif. Look at that. Filters the whole thing. Brilliant. Absolutely love these features. When I'm done, I'm going to click the clear all and I get it back right to my font menu. So this is, fantastic. Now you can add fonts to your system, which you do outside of Illustrator, by the way. So on Mac, you can use your font book. On the PC, you have to get them into your fonts folder, but that's completely outside the realm of Illustrator. So that's pretty much our character panel. Now I'm going to select copy again, doing my Command or Control A to select all. Let's talk about our paragraph panel. So here I can do my left justified, centered, and right justified. One odd thing that Illustrator does is when you do any of your justifications, you'll notice that the type doesn't stay in the same place. And oddly enough, when we're working with Illustrator here and it's flush left, you see it's right here, and when I did it centered, I would expect the word Illustrator to stay there and the word type in kind of center over it. No, it doesn't. It then takes the left edge of the container and then calls that the center as you do it. So if you're doing this, you can see it jumps all over the page. Just an odd feature in Illustrator. One of the other things that's odd too is that when you have type that you break and you break this and you put a space in here, it counts that space and it could end up actually making the type look like it's not lined up. So something to think about. If I've got my type and I've got my spaces in here like this, and I have it set to be flush right, and I put my cursor here and I simply break that type, I need to go back in and I need to remember to remove that space. Because if you don't, that space, and it's weird because in other applications that space just seems to disappear and it lines up the type. not in Illustrator. It doesn't do it, okay? So that's something to think about when you are going in and doing your paragraph formatting. Down here we have our indents and spacing for any of our paragraph type. So if I take my type tool and I create my paragraph type, I do this, you can see, let me reduce the size of this overall using my nice shortcut, which is my Shift Command less than. And I'm going to center everything, by the way. Left, centered, and right justified is going to be Shift Command L or Shift Control L. Center is going to be Shift Command C or Shift Control C. Right justified is going to be Shift Command Right or R or Shift Control R for right justified. So I just did the Shift Command C to get it centered justified. If I don't want hyphenation, I can just simply turn off that hyphenation button. I'm very much against hyphenation because it was great in the days of typewriters, not so much when you're going in and you're setting type and you're being a designer. I want to have more control over this. I'm going to go back to my left justified, and I just did Shift Command L for left justified. And here, when I have paragraph type, I can then go in and I can set my left and right margins to kind of bump the type in if I would like to do that. I can also control the spacing between my paragraphs. So if I have a paragraph return here, or I put a paragraph return, I can then take all my copy, and I'm just going to reduce it down inside here so you can see how my paragraph spacing works. So if I have my paragraph spacing, I can then set my paragraph spacing to have more spacing after my paragraphs, even if I've got multi-line paragraphs here. I'm going to select my copy, and I'm going to put the leading, say, at 80 points, so it's going to be tight together. Paragraph spacing goes and puts spacing only after where I put in a paragraph return. Okay, so different than leading. This is actually, it's like double spacing, but you go in and you set it so that this paragraph return that's here doesn't have to be double spacing. It can be any amount of space that you want. So basic paragraph and character formatting here in Illustrator. So we've talked about point type and paragraph type, but what would happen if we wanted to put text inside a container or text along the edge of a container or a line? Well, that's where our area type tool and our type and a path tool comes in. Illustrator things work slightly differently. I can't go and simply draw a shape like a circle. I'm going to use Shift X to switch the fill for the stroke. And then I can't just go in and take my type tool and start typing inside the circle because it won't know that it's inside that circle. So what I have to do is I have to take my shape that I've drawn, go to my area type tool, which then gives me my cursor with the dots around it, and that little pointer that is on that cursor, I then go to my shape, and what I want to do is I want to touch that shape with that little pointy arrow in the cursor to then allow me to select that shape and tell that shape that this is where the type is going to go in. Once I put my text in the shape, then I can set the size of the text and the size of my leading and have this be inside my shape. Okay. Now, the thing with putting text inside an area or text inside a shape here is that you will lose all the attributes of the shape. So no matter what color you start off with or what stroke you put on that shape, that will always disappear. So you cannot have an object that has a fill and stroke on it and have text in it as well. So if you want something that looks like it's filled with color, you will have to have that shape as a separate filled shape and then the text as a separate text shape as well. So that's area type. Simple. You draw your area, then make sure you use your text area tool, and then make sure you touch that box to say this is the container that I don't want it to go in. And then to edit that, you can use your normal type tool just to go in and edit. You don't need the area type tool to edit, but you can use it. Not a problem. The next is going to be type on a path. This is a little bit more interesting. So open or closed shape doesn't make any difference. I'm going to use the closed shape. And again, same thing with the area type tool. Whatever attributes or colors, fills, strokes you put on your shape will disappear. So it doesn't matter that this is filled with black, because the second I activate this as a path, this black will go away. Choosing the Type on a Path tool, I get my Type tool that has the little wavy slinky arms, and where the arms come out of the body is where I'm going to click on my path to then turn that into Type on a Path. Now this is on the path, it's not in the shape. They have two separate tools to go put the area type in and the type on the path. You have to use the right tool in order to activate it. There's my Type on a Path, and I can type as much as I'd like, and I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste this, because one of the things that can happen is you can put too much type on a path and then you get that red plus right there showing you that there's not enough room for all the copy to fit. So just like in paragraph text, you can have that red plus, which is overset text, too much in the given space. Now, going back to the selection tool, you can control how the type falls in the path. We have our start and our stop bars here. Hovering over those, you can see I get a vertical line going right, which is basically the start of my copy. And then I get the vertical bar going to the left, which is basically the end of my copy. And think of these start and stop bars as kind of those concrete parking strips that you pull your car into a parking spot, and then you basically can't go beyond this parking block right there. Okay, these are your limits. These are your stops right there. Now you'll notice when I first clicked on them, they were nice and tall, but when I started moving them, they're really short. And here's one thing. You can't grab onto those little squares, okay? Those squares are not handles. Those are linking so you can link to other things. And you'll do that and you'll wonder why it doesn't work at all. I know, and it's crazy, because why would they make them smaller when you clicked on them? I have no idea. So you have to be very careful when you want to move those stops to control the start and the stop of your type. And you have to hover the cursor over until your cursor tells you you are on the beginning, vertical, pointing to the right, or you're at the end, vertical, pointing to the left. If you move these all around and you do this, you can see that you're going to move those stops so you have less room to work with. So you got to open those stops up. And again, all of a sudden it's like, boom, they got bigger. And it's like, okay, great. Those aren't handles, folks. You have to pull on these little bars. Those are the handles, okay? I know, very tricky. There it is. Now you'll notice directly opposite of those two handles in the middle of your type is this little bar, and it kind of looks like a thumbtack when you hover over this, okay? Little thumbtack symbol right there. This is kind of a joystick. And instead of setting your start and your stop limits and going around the circle, you can grab this joystick and you can spin it around. However, if you keep your cursor outside your shape, the type will stay outside the shape. If you pull your cursor inside the shape and move it around, it will come on the inside. And people will see this as they're going around. They're like it bounces inside and out. Cursor in, type in. Cursor out, type out. That's what you have to pay attention to. Now, what other hideous things would you like to do with Type on a Path? Well, let's go under the Type menu. And we have our Type on a Path and our Type on a Path options. So here we've got some different types of types on a path. Little did you know this is called rainbow. Well, we can have rainbow, we can have skew. Oh, Lord, that's terrible. 3D ribbon, oh, even worse. Stair step, oh, boy, when things go bad, they go bad hard. And then gravity, which looks very much like rainbow. Flipping just allows you to flip it inside and out, which you could do here with a joystick, or you could do right here using the flip button. You can align everything to the baseline, which says the type, the bottom of the type aligns to the actual line of the copy. And you can see it doesn't quite line up. You can go line it to the ascenders, which is everything ascending to the very top most point. The descenders, anything like the Y's and the G's that are the P's that go down and descend beyond the baseline. Or you can just say, okay, make it on the baseline, or you can center this directly in your Type on a Path. Okay, there you have it. Basic Type on a Path. To edit Type on a Path, you can use the Type tool as well. Not a problem, because it just becomes type once you're working with this. Can you go and make this on an open shape? Of course you can. if I decided that I was going to just grab my pencil tool and I just decided to draw a line like this, there, take my type in a path, click on that, make sure those little squiggly lines from the body, click on that, and I can do a left justified, centered, or right justified, and there's my type on a path. So, simple, easy to do. Quite nice. Now, the type tools that I will not show you. Okay, so I'll show you this, but I'm only going to show you because they're absolutely horrible when it comes to graphic design. You should never stack type vertically, folks, okay? Ever. But they have the vertical stacks types, here. Do not do this. This is terrible. It's so hard to read, but there's your vertical type, okay? And I know it's cringeworthy and everything else. Okay, I showed you. I'm not going to show you again. Terrible. This is your area vertical type tool, and then this is your vertical type on a path tool. So no, no, and absolutely not. Okay, there it is. Now let's come to the touch type tool. Touch type? What the heck is that? Well, here's what it is. I'm going to type out the word panda, and I'm going to make it large. And I'm going to pick a font that I think is going to be nice and chunky, and I want to have a little bit of fun with this. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to move each letter individually in size, shape, and rotation, but I still want to keep it actually active type. If I didn't want it active type, I can go and convert it to outlines, which I will show you, and move it all around, but it would no longer be active type. So if I wanted to change the typeface, I wouldn't be able to do that. So here, I love this font, Fat Frank Heavy. All right, there it is. Now once I have my type, and I have it selected with my selection tool, I'm going to use the Touch Type tool. And then I can select any character, and I've got 4 little dots and 1 dot kind of at the top, kind of like a little bow on the package. The top one allows me to rotate this, but keep it kind of within the copy of the font. It's still active copy, okay? I can use this as a vertical stretch. Ugh. I can use this as a horizontal stretch. Oh no. There's my horizontal stretch. Okay, that's my vertical, that's my horizontal. So this one, I can pull to make larger or smaller. And then this one I can take and pull it below the baseline or move it up above. So if I wanted to do something wacky and crazy like this, and start to nest my type in a way that is just, bizarre, fun, interesting, and just have a little bit of fun with it, I could do this and still make it all one typeface. Now, it's still type, it's still totally active, but there it is. So there is my Touch Type tool, okay? Now, how useful is this? Well, I don't know, but it's there, okay? So I just wanted to show you what that was. So if I select that, you can see it's still active type. Now, if I do change the typeface here, of course, the relationship of these letters is going to change completely. So now it just looks like they went through a blender. But nonetheless, it's still cool that you can have active type. Okay? Have I ever used this? Once. Once I've used this. Okay? So there it is. For what it's worth, I showed you. So now you know what the Touch Type tool is. Let's talk about color when we're selecting typefaces. Color's simple. So if I select the type, I do not have to go and select the copy with my type tool. If I'd like to fill all my selected copy with a color, simple. Click on the entire text box or text container and go over to my Properties panel, click on the Fill. Choose any of the colors that I have in my swatches panel or make a color from my color picker, color mixer, whatever, and all the copy is changed. If I would like to change just particular characters, that's where I'll have to go in, activate my type tool, select the type that I would like to change the color of, and then go in and change only that. Pretty simple, okay? So, no rocket science on there. But what does work very well is being able to go in and work with type after you have gone in and converted it to outlines so that it's no longer active type. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to manipulate this typeface beyond active type. And I'm going to duplicate this because I want to show you one very specific thing. I'm going to select this type with my selection tool, go under Type, go under Create Outlines, which is Shift-Command or Shift-Control-O. It's now broken into outlines. Now you can't tell when you're looking at this, but I'm going to go into preview mode, which is going to be Command or Control-Y. Active type is always going to be solid black. Anything that is not active type, like a shape, is going to be outlines. So now I know when I'm in outline mode, what is and what isn't active type. Here, because it's now just a shape, of course I can go to my fill panel and I can click on any color that I'd like. And I can also ungroup these by doing my Shift-Command-G. And then I can manipulate each and every one of these shapes. It's no longer type. Yes, I know it looks like type, but it isn't. Because I may want to have a little bit of fun here. I may want to take the ascender of this D right here and just select that top point there and just kind of extend it and do something like that. Maybe I'd like to change kind of like the negative space inside here, or have some fun with any attributes or aspects of any of these here, and maybe move them around, scale them and size them in a different way, and just basically play with the relationship of those. And I can do that because it's no longer type, it is just an active shape, okay? How do I know that? Well, I know by going into outline mode, but also if I go to my layers panel too, I can see if I open up all my content here, anytime that I do type, in my layers panel, the name of the layer will always reflect what the active type is. Now, if I go and I break it into outlines, it no longer will show as active type. So if I expand my layers panel and make this larger so you can see, you'll notice I know this is text, I know this is text, this is text, and this is text. Why? Because the name of my layer matches the name of the text inside my container or inside my bounding box with point type. So interesting things to do. But that, in a nutshell, is pretty much how type and text works in Illustrator.